today we're going to be talking about my favorite camera, the LUMIX S5II. Who would have guessed? So I just wanted to talk about my experience over the last 2 years using this camera, my professional experience, my personal experience, and then also kind of offer a different perspective because I know a lot of people buy this for video, and the reason I own this camera is, of course, also for video. However, I'm also a professional photographer, so I will be talking about the ergonomics, the handling, and everything great about this camera from a photo perspective as well. I think a lot of people underrate it for its photo capabilities, despite the fact that it is a very capable photo camera. Just for disclosure, LUMIX did send me an S5II all the way back in 2023. However, I liked it so much that I went out and bought a second one with my own money. So this review will either be biased or non-biased based on that opinion, but just know that I spent my own money on one of these because I love it that much. I also bought all the lenses on my own. I have a bunch of Sigma glass and a bunch of vintage glass, and I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get to that later. So let's start off with something that I think a lot of people have already talked about, which is autofocus. I think that when you're using autofocus for photos with any of the L-mount lenses, it's perfect. I have never really had a problem with my LUMIX autofocus. I'm shooting on a Sony FX30 right now, which says the perfect Sony autofocus, and I've never noticed a difference between my FX30 autofocus and my LUMIX autofocus in terms of photos. I really do genuinely believe that if you need a good photo camera, you could even go all the way back to the original S5, but if you want to make sure that every single shot hits, even at the 10 frames a second mechanical burst mode and the 30 frames a second electronic shutter burst mode, then you want to go with the LUMIX S5II. It's just an incredible camera for photos. I really love the autofocus performance. I've built 80% of my entire photography career on this camera. I've tried out the Leica Q, I've tried out other Sony cameras, I've tried out Canon cameras, and what I always came back to with the LUMIX was the combination of image quality and handling. I don't really love the Nikon cameras because everything's backwards and I'm just used to using things not backwards. I really love right here, as you might be able to see, I have a thumb dial right here, a forward dial right here, and then my ISO dial right back here. And maybe it's a combination of being used to it or maybe just going from video cameras to photo cameras, but for whatever reason, my hand sits very, very well on these dials. I'm able to access them whenever I need. I feel like everything on this camera is really well thought out and designed. So in terms of handling, like if I was to let my pinky finger hang off of here, I guess the grip's not super big. I normally end up kind of choking up on it and putting my pinky finger here and then having my pointer finger up here ready to take a picture. And I also love that we have the AF button right back here. It works just like how you would expect, I guess, a Canon 5D to work. I love that because I used to use Canon DSLRs when I was learning photography. This feels like a better evolution in that direction than I think the current Canon mirrorless cameras. Don't kill me, don't crucify me. I just don't love the handling on the Canon EOS R series. I much prefer the handling on the LUMIX S series. That also goes for the Leica cameras, but I don't have Leica SL money. Okay, let's talk about image quality. So this is reported to have about the same sensor as the original A7 III from Sony, and it's a great sensor. I mean, I have no problem with the 24 megapixels that I have in here. Will I be upgrading to the LUMIX S1R2 when it comes out? Absolutely. 45 megapixels it's exactly what I need to up my photo game, but currently I haven't had any issues where 24 megapixels was too low of a resolution. If I were to blow something up and put it on a billboard or like a skyscraper, then I would definitely want the 45 megapixels. But even right now when I've been printing my work and I'm currently working on a photo book that will be printed in April, for the printing purposes of the photo book, the 24 megapixels in this camera has been enough. And I'm really happy because I don't know, there's just something about being able to print your work as a photographer that's important. So if you go any lower than this, to say like 12 or even 16 megapixels, you really don't have enough resolution to get a good print out of that without doing some upscaling or involving AI or sharpening. You can just take the camera's photos, the raw photos, do some color, do some adjustments, and you have something that's ready to print, and it just feels really nice. I don't know whether the raw photos that come out of this are either 12-bit or 14-bit. I will put on screen when I do my research and figure it out, but I've never had any problem with the color depth on the raw photos out of this. In fact, you can even get cinema DNG if you just do the 30 frames a second burst mode and just turn that into video files. The color depth on this camera is really great for photos. I'm able to do all of my film processes. I'm able to push and pull the color. The highlights retention is like really incredible, and I get a lot of detail out of the shadows as well. It's a little bit more noisy in the shadows than in the highlights, so you could, basically push your highlights a little bit more than your shadows with this camera. And I've never had a problem in terms of not being able to get an exposure in the dark. I can always bump up my ISO. Even at ISO 12,800, I can just clean it up with a little bit of noise reduction and it looks really good. But I find myself shooting at like 4,000 a lot on here, and I'm getting pretty clean photos. I just really enjoy the experience of having the full range of photography capabilities on this. Now, you could talk about the L mount having fewer lens options than the E mount, but it has more lens options than the Z mount. It has more lens options than the RF mount for sure. So you have a pretty strong Leica, Sigma, Lumix, even I think Viltrox and Samyang are making lenses for L mount now. So you have a lot of good autofocus options for your lenses here. And the only problem with the L mount that has been kind of recent is that there's no support from certain manufacturers for their mirrorless only anamorphic or mirrorless only like cine lenses. They'll go E, X, RF, Z, and they'll exclude L mount for some reason, despite the fact that we have a lot of L mount shooters. So hopefully that changes in the future. I've had a really good experience with L mount, and I also should stop buying so many lenses. So maybe it's a good thing that there's not unlimited choices out there. The final thing I want to talk about with this camera that really puts it above, I think, every other camera out there in this price range is the real-time LUT feature. Now, it is a really big deal when you show a client the picture on the back of your screen and they have an emotional, positive reaction to that. So not only does that feel good as a working photographer, but it's important for them to see your vision. So you can prepare the LUT that you want or the look that you want before you go into a shoot. And then as you're taking the photos and showing them to your client, they can see not a fully edited version of what you're going to deliver to them, but you'll be able to give them a really close representation of that, and that makes a really big difference. It's much easier than explaining, oh, the color's not ready, or oh, like, just look at the composition or how sharp it is. Like, you don't really want to be doing that when you're with a client. You want to just show them an image, they want to be like, oh, that's great, I love that, and then move on. That's why people love the Fuji and the Leica systems, because you take a photo, the JPEG looks great, everyone's happy, you can use that for social media if you want, and then you can take the RAW afterwards and really just kind of push and pull it all you want. So I really love the fact that you can use real-time LUT on this camera and just be able to show your clients and your friends and everyone right away what it is you're shooting. I also find that real-time LUT is really helpful for me when I'm exposing in video. We'll get to the video section next, but the big thing I want to talk about in the photo is real-time LUT in Vlog versus 709. So if you're shooting Vlog as your picture profile, despite the fact that you're shooting RAW plus JPEG, there's some science going on. I read this on one of the LUMIX forums that if you shoot in Vlog and RAW at the same time, you're losing about a stop in the shadows for your RAW photo. I don't know why that is. So I always shoot in the 709 profile on my camera, and then I use a 709 LUT on top of that. So my real-time LUT for the JPEGs is a 709 LUT that I put over the 709 profile on the camera. It looks like a Leica color science, it looks really great, and people are happy with that. And then when I bring the RAW photo into Capture One, Lightroom, DaVinci Resolve, it's in 709 RAW, so we don't have any issues with losing detail. It's just a side note, I haven't seen anyone talk about that on YouTube yet, so if that matters to you, then you're welcome. I've been talking so long that I had to go get some water because I'm getting dry in the throat. Now let's talk about the real reason why I got this camera. Let's talk about video. I love shooting video on this camera. I don't know if I can fit all the ways that I love shooting video on this camera into one video, so I'll try and edit it down, but this camera was really made with a hybrid shooter in mind, And I just love the fact that for the price that you can pay for this camera, you're getting as good image quality as any camera up to about the Arri Alexa or the V-Raptor or the Venice. Let's talk about the positives. Autofocus. The autofocus in this is great. So I personally don't love using autofocus on jobs because you're kind of gambling with your image. You know, you don't know if the autofocus is going to jump onto the background, you don't know what's going to happen. So I usually use a combination of autofocus and manual focus for my jobs. Even when I'm shooting on a Sony camera or a LUMIX camera or whatever I'm shooting on, I always make sure that I can use manual control at some point in order to nail the shots that I need to, because no matter what, autofocus is not perfect. So with all that being said, with that huge caveat out of the way, do I like the autofocus on the LUMIX cameras? And the answer is yes. The answer is I honestly don't need to think about it quite that often. There's been some firmware updates where they say they've improved the autofocus, and you know, they say that almost every time. I haven't noticed the difference from the beginning to the end because I'm not a crazy autofocus user for my jobs, but for my social media work, it's never been an issue, and I honestly have had a wonderful experience with autofocus. So if you're on the Sony system and you're like, oh, I like the full frame LUMIX system and I really like what's going on with that, I wish the autofocus was better, it's good enough. It's great. It's probably better than Canon and Nikon at this point. So if you're really worried about autofocus, I wouldn't be. Let's talk about image quality. So I don't know if I said this earlier in the video or not, but I think that the S5II is the best looking mirrorless camera in its price point. And I think that it is the best looking mirrorless camera besides the S1H, the R5II, the Z8, and the A9 III and the A1. So all those are flagship cameras. And this looks better than the A7S III in my opinion, which means it looks better than the FX3 and the FX6. I really love the highlight roll-off. The vlog looks really great. The 6K footage, there's something about the color in the 6K footage versus my 4K or the 1080p that I shoot on this. I might do a color analysis of it later, but the main thing that I found in this camera that blows me away is the OpenGate 6K image quality. It looks really just organic and fantastic. I don't do a ton of sharpening afterwards. I don't do like a crazy amount of color grading. That's a lie, I do a crazy amount of color grading, but this is able to handle it. Somehow in the 420 codec, not even a 422, but the 420 6K, it just gives you this incredible image that could be on a movie screen. I've had multiple clients look at my footage and be like, oh, this could be a movie, because they have no idea. They wouldn't be able to tell the difference between this and a Venice. I know that a Venice looks better. I know that an Alexa looks better, and I know that a Raptor looks better. But for most of the jobs that I'm shooting, I don't need those cameras, and this gives me so much flexibility in post. It gives me so many stops of dynamic range, and I'm just so impressed by the highlight retention on this. You can go 4 stops over, bring it down, and it still looks incredibly clean. As long as you're not clipping your highlights on this camera, you have incredible image quality, and I'll stop talking about it now. So speaking of the image quality and the highlights and everything like that, how do I expose this camera? You're going to want to expose to the right if you can. 2 stops to 3 stops over looks really good, and then just pull it down in post. A lot of people are using the HDR wheel method. You can just use your offset. If you just pull your image down in post, you get really clean shadows. You're looking at 0 to no noise, and you have a lot of flexibility with where you want the exposure to sit as well. Like if you want to brighten certain parts of the image, you can just mask those out. You just have the opportunity to maneuver your image in such a way when you expose to the right that I think that for mirrorless cameras, not for cinema cameras, but for mirrorless cameras, it's the best way to expose. So I already talked about lenses and autofocus, and I mentioned the 6K, but let's talk about the different recording modes on here. There are a ton of different recording modes on the S5II that are available. I personally think that the 6K looks the best. It's the highest resolution, it's got the most color information, it looks beautiful. OpenGate is just the future. Shooting in 3x2 is great. The 4K 60, now that has a crop on this camera. Do I find that annoying or irksome? Not really. I shot on Super 35 cameras most of the time until I went to full frame. So like having the crop factor and just buying wider lenses and having like, you know, the wide angle zoom and then a standard zoom, and just knowing to swap over to your wide angle zoom when you crop in 1.5 times, I don't really see it as much of an issue. Some people are like really particular. They want to make sure they have like the most bokeh or like this or that, and they're really like focused on this crop as a limiting factor. My personal opinion on the crop is that if a 1.5 times crop on your sensor is preventing you from making a good shot, then maybe the shot wasn't good to begin with, or maybe you're just not being creative enough. So I said what I said. You can get a great shot on a 1.5 times crop because all you really need to do is think of it like a prime lens, just back up, right? Or if you have a zoom lens, swap to a wider zoom and zoom out. Maybe you don't get the same exact depth of field, maybe you don't get this or that. Personally, I don't see the creamy, like overly like sharp, shallow depth of field look as something that I'm trying to achieve all the time. And if I am trying to achieve that look, then I already have that in mind before I like go in, and if I know I'm gonna do slow motion, shallow depth of field, I just plan for that ahead of time. I don't like expect my camera to make up for my lack of planning. That's not how it should be. You should plan around what your camera is capable of doing. Now, when I get the LUMIX S1R2 with the full frame 6K 60, is that gonna look great and be wonderful? Yeah, sure, of course. That'll be great. Do I need that in order to make a good image? No, I don't need that to make a good image. So I'm working with what I have right now. I don't think that the crop is a giant issue. And if it was, then I wouldn't have bought a second S5II. That's my personal opinion on it. The 1080p on this is kind of soft. It's not like super soft, it's just softer than the 6K or the 4K. And if you don't want a soft image, don't shoot in 1080p. I think the 1080p is more than usable on this. I think it looks really good. The 1080p 120 frames a second, that's pretty soft and it doesn't look great, especially because you lose certain autofocus functions. So I'll show you my rig in a second. I'll do a test on that later today actually. But if you have the ability to manually focus in 120 frames a second, maybe for like a macro shot or a detail shot, it'll still look good. You just probably want to apply just a tiny bit of sharpening in post if you want to have a sharp look. If you don't care about how sharp the image is and you just want a nice image, the 1080p looks great, it looks fine. There's nothing wrong with it. So this is my cinema build with the LUMIX S5II. We have it in one of those cine back cages. I think this one is a Rigid Pro. We've got a V-mount attached to the back. We have the monitor here on a monitor arm with a top handle. We have power going into the camera, HDMI to my monitor. So the reason why I got a second S5II was so that I could rig one up permanently and have it for video just like this. I think a lot of people kind of underestimate the optics of what things look like on set. So if I pull up to set with a camera that looks like this, do you think that the client is going to take me seriously and consider that I maybe know what I'm doing? Of course. However, if I just pull up with this camera, and there's nothing wrong with this camera, but I've had so many people unfortunately ask me if this camera shoots video. The camera that shoots 6K, open gate, beautiful cinema-like images, does that camera shoot video? And the answer is yes, of course it does. But this camera obviously shoots video. I think that having things in a rig, whether it's going to be your FX30, whether it's going to be your Canon R5C or your Sony a7S III, just having the ability to at least put a battery on the back, that will for sure make sure that people take you seriously, and if they don't take you seriously, they at least understand that you look serious. There's other benefits to rigging things up like this as well. I'm able to take the LiDAR system and put it onto my other camera as well if I want to go really lightweight and just throw it in my backpack and go. I keep it rigged up on here for the most part just because I have the rail systems kind of pre-installed. This is just a better use case for the LiDAR autofocus in general, the ability to just throw cinema lenses on with my positive EF lock mount, and honestly I just kind of wanted to show this off in a video as well, which is why we're looking at it right now. So overall, I think that the LUMIX S5II and the L-mount system in general is really great. It's really worth your investment. If you want to go for something that's safe and looks just good enough, Sony cameras are good. They're great. If you care about image quality and you care about, you know, the small things that really matter to the shooting experience, I think you won't be disappointed with a LUMIX S5II, the new S1R2, or even the original S5. I think the L-mount system is beautiful, it is great, and I'm just so happy that this camera has been with me in order to kind of bring my career to where it is right now. And yeah, I really love this camera. I think you'd like it too. Thank you so much for watching, and if you feel like I missed anything, please let me know in the comments.